Awesome. Welcome everybody for coming to what I have now called Candy's Short Guides to Learning. I love that you guys are showing up online. I am used to doing this face to face, and I love the idea of having an interaction. So before I hit record today, and welcome to those of you that are just popping on right now, just before I hit record, I was saying I would love to have your feedback in the chat. I will be recording and uploading this onto our YouTube channel, just so that you guys can, if you can't attend today, that you can actually be watching this. And the topic is really so vital right now. We talk a lot about mental wellness, mental health, some ideas around what does self-care actually mean. We hear a lot about that, especially in this last year. It has been a fantastic year, and a really tough year for a lot of people. So the idea of self-care can be on both sides, right? Like, it doesn't mean that we're in the dumps or that we're feeling super low. That's the only time we need to have that attention to ourselves and take care of ourselves. Sometimes it's on those highs, right? When everything's going really well and we're really busy and there's a lot coming at us. That is another perfect time for us to take care of ourselves and be very conscious and aware and intentional on how we're setting up our self-care. So welcome everybody. Just an introduction just about me. My name is Lisa Gareau, and I am the founder of CandyConsulting, and I have had the joy, and I say the joy and privilege, of working with so many in-house. I call a lot of you that are planning and promoting events off of the side of your desks, or maybe it's just you're part of a committee, maybe you have been a long-term volunteer, maybe you're an entrepreneur, you're doing your own product launches. All of those things are gatherings that matter. And my work has been now for about 12 years, actually December will be 12 years right now, that I have been really supporting anybody that has been planning or promoting their own events. And the beauty of that is that the more we gather, the more we get people actually meaningfully coming together. It means that our nonprofits are strong. It means that you're raising the money that you need to. It also means that you are connecting and finding those resources that are going to make a difference for your events. So that is my work. I love it. I also love having the opportunity to meet with you guys. As I said to some of you that were on right at the beginning, this is a back and forth conversation, and I call them conversations for a reason, because I don't have all the answers. I certainly love to pose a lot of questions, and so be ready for that. Your face would be shown if you choose to chime in. Because I will be recording this, and it'll be on speaker view. So if you don't mind that, that's great. If you want to add something to the chat, that's fantastic. It'll allow me to actually answer some questions you might have, or actually give feedback that you're giving to the group, to everybody. So feel free, fill up the chat box. Let us know maybe if you want to add your name, where you're from, and maybe some of the events that you're planning in there right now. That'd be fantastic. Gives me a little bit of a context around how we're showing up today. I know a few of you on the call, so I appreciate that you guys are here. And for those of you that are watching, make sure that underneath, in the YouTube link underneath, there's going to be a link to your workbook. So there's a corresponding workbook that goes with this. That is a way for you to follow along, kind of know where my head's at in the topic, and then for you guys to chime in and give some feedback as well. So feel free to jump into the chat. Let's see who's here and what kind of events that you're planning, and I'll give a little bit of an introduction on what self-care means to me. And I think probably you guys are going to identify with this. So jumping right in, I have been posting a lot about this session. It matters a lot to me. It's something that I went through burnout very early in my life. I was about 20 to 24, had done a lot of community work. Came into probably my 23rd, 24th year of life, really feeling like I had just done it all. I had been so involved and the work I was doing, not just to bring money in to pay my rent, but the work I was doing in the community really filled me up, but filled me up to a point where it was just too much. And I had no gauge or way that I understood to really feed back into the work that I was doing in a way that was coming from a settled and a very grounded place. And so that was work I had to do in my 20s and 30s, and really understanding that we have to be very conscious on how we're showing up for ourselves. The reality is, and this is another part of my journey, the reality is, as event planners, people that are busy, you might have family at home, you might have other obligations. The idea of actually taking care of ourselves sometimes feels overwhelming, in the sense that we can't drop the ball. We have to keep everything going. And when I had posted about this particular event or this particular session, I had some people messaging me saying, I've got this cased. I do yoga. I walk my dog. I really don't need any help because I have mastered my self-care. And I didn't want to necessarily get into it with a lot of people that were messaging me. I was saying, good for you. And I'm really glad that a lot of people have found that rhythm. But the reality of self-care, and that's where I talk about it being sustainable, the reality of self-care is that we can't just not feed our children. We can't just not show up at that event. We have to be somehow in the game. And sometimes we need to take that full step back, but there is a responsibility that we've taken on. And I take those things very seriously, where we need to understand what is our role in the moment, what are those tasks and the people that are, like I say, under our care, but at the same time, we're caring for ourselves, and we're able to kind of make sure that that we are showing up, not just authentically, but we're showing up with all of our energy and our vigor for the work that we have chosen to do. So this idea of having both and I told you a little bit about my burnout experience when I first started kind of getting into the world of work and doing the work that I loved. But I also came to a space where I was a single mom for several years, and that feeling like I started my business right in the middle of all of that. And I had to keep all those balls in the air and make sure that everything was happening at the same time, really nurturing and caring for my kids at the time, my girls at the time. And sometimes our events are like our kids, right? There's so many aspects and there's so many, sometimes fires to put out. There's people involved. There's a lot of layers. And it's really important for us to hold that dear and make sure that we're able to, at the same time, take care of those things. So in the chat box, we've got a couple of people. We've got somebody that is planning events and volunteering. Oh, for the Association of Admin Professionals. Thanks, Allison, for that. You were planning networking and social events. That's awesome. Joette, we've got, oh, welcome, Joette. We've got, you are the marketing and events coordinator with BusinessLink, which is, you guys do multiple events every month as well. And you've got webinars, virtual, Zoom, and you miss people. So I'm glad you're here. Awesome. Thank you guys for adding. There's a few others for adding in the chat. Before we get started, just another hands up or give me a thumbs up if you've received the PDF for the booklet for today. Does anyone still need it? Okay, we've got a couple that may not have it. I am going to drop it into the chat box here. And for those of you that are watching the recording, you can find that at just underneath in the description, there's going to be a link right there for you so you can download it as well. Where have we got you here? Just give me 1 second and I'm going to drop that in the chat, and then we're going to start in with our descriptions of what does self-care mean and what does sustainable mean. All right, so it's just loading into the chat box right now. So feel free to open that up, or you can just follow along. I've got my trusty whiteboard behind me, so that'll help too. Awesome. So this idea of self-care in your booklet, so there's going to be a page that looks like this. It says, what makes self-care sustainable? So I'm a big fan of definitions. And so this idea of self-care for planners, how important that is, and it holds benefits for ourselves to take care of ourselves, but it also holds benefits for the projects under our care. And more importantly, for those people that work really hard on those projects with us, it really matters. And so my definition of self-care is, this is for planners, is that all things a planner does to promote personal well-being and happiness in all areas of their life, so they can remain healthy, active, and vital in their life and work, and have the impact that they desire. And the idea of self-care for me, sometimes people say self-care isn't selfish. I believe that as well. I think sometimes, especially in a role, whether you're an admin, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're somebody that is trying to make a difference in the world, you've got something going on that matters. We want to make an impact. And the idea of taking time for ourselves, not only does that maybe feel selfish, sometimes that might feel like I am going to not do the work that I'm called to do, or that I really want to do, or that I know needs to be done. And we pull ourselves along, and we just keep doing that work in the same way we've always done that work. And so this idea of remaining healthy, active, and vital in our life and work will not only serve us, again, this is going to serve the impact that we want to make in the world. And so if we understand this deep connection between self-care and that work we're called to do, even though we might feel depleted in time, energy, and motivation, sometimes the routines that we put into place can actually help us keep showing up. There's going to be an adjustment over time, kind of like driving a car. You're going to make these minor adjustments, but you're going to learn the tools so that you can actually stay in the game and make sure that those things are taken care of. So jumping to sustainability, this idea that the event planner, you naturally take on this role of caring and leading others. And this idea of sustainability comes in, and I've made up this definition, so you're not going to find it online, but I think it's going to be helpful for you. Self-care, sustainability for a dedicated event planner means taking care of the immediate self-care needs to survive, while setting up a foundation to thrive through intentional routines, applying new resources, and all of this is to ensure future self-care needs are met more easily. Does that make sense? Is there a place where sometimes we jump into self-care, and give me a sort of a wave or a thumbs up, where we jump into self-care when we've hit the wall? And that's our sign that we've hit a wall. Sometimes that is necessary. And I tell you, I have a business coach, and I emailed him the other day, and this is probably the first day that I haven't had my hair in like a top knot and just in my pajamas and doing what I had to do just to get through the day. But I was saying to him, I think I just need to pull my foot off the gas, because it has been quite the year. And just this idea of going full on. We're racing to the end of this year and trying to make a difference in the world that I personally am working at making that difference in. But for me to say I've got to just take my foot off the gas a bit, it doesn't mean that I'm pressing stop or that I'm hitting the brakes. It means that I just need to pull back a bit. And that was my way of saying to him that for me to thrive right now, it means that I've got to just take it back just a little. And sometimes this idea of sustainability is scary for us, because if you have a lot of balls in the air, the feeling of dropping a ball sometimes can cause us more stress than either hitting the brakes or taking your foot off the gas. Sometimes that causes a lot of stress because we feel like everything is going to fall apart. All the seams are going to come loose and we're not going to know what to do next. And we're going to have to actually take even more time pulling ourselves together, pulling all of the tasks together, re-engaging with our team. And we fear that because sometimes we're in that survival mode because we feel like if we let it all go, if we even take our foot off the gas, things will fall apart. Have you ever felt like that? Yeah, so there is this space, and that's why I say this idea of honoring that part of ourselves that wants to be a leader, that wants to be in the game, that wants to keep all the tasks in the air and everything moving. There is more to this than, like you've all heard, than a bubble bath or a walk or just taking some time out, because we are built for action, right? Give me a thumbs up. You guys are probably the same way, right? You're just built to go. And I used to have a black lab, and they say she was field trained because she could not sit still. And there was always something, you know, that she needed to be running or playing or doing something. And I think if you're in this kind of a role, if you're taking on events as a career or as part of your job, there is that go-getter kind of attitude that we are ready to go. So this idea of making what we do and this self-care sustainable will help us relax, because we will know that things will still get done because we have set that foundation for ourselves. But as I'll talk about a little bit in this session, we're going to find the allies and the resources and the tools that we need to make sure that we're just taking care of ourselves over time, every day, all year long. This is something that is an ongoing task. So you're good to really dive in now. We're going to go through 10 steps to sustainable self-care. And as you jump in, and thanks for those that have added to the chat box, feel free to add any comments there about what does it mean. If any of you have struggled with this idea of sustainability, I would love to hear maybe some of the tools and ideas that you have around how you've been able to actually address that in your own life. So feel free to add those. I think those will be valuable for everyone in the group. But to start off, we're going to start with number one being determining our priorities. So all of us have what I say might feel like conflicting priorities. So this idea of having multiple things in life, you've got a lot going on, and somehow they feel like they're all, you know, some are huge and some are small, but you've got a lot of things that need your attention. You've got to have your eyes on everything all at that same time. So the idea of determining priorities, sometimes this might have been from the 90s or the 80s, but the idea of women can have it all. You can do it all. There is, I guess, for some of us that have grown through that philosophy and believe that at a point, sometimes there will be a priority here that is going to take all of your attention, or let's say 80%, 90% of your attention, and you've got to focus on that. There are now ways to set your priorities so that you're able just to put some other things, maybe take the gas off of certain things and then hit the gas on others, or make sure that you're really increasing this attention on one or two things that will be a priority for you. So how in your life, when you're feeling like you are, you're feeling like everything is urgent, the saying is, if everything urgent, nothing is. So this idea of how do you set priorities for yourself? When you're feeling like everything is there, what is a tool that you use to really allow yourself to focus in on one thing? And I'm not saying for months at a time, make lists. Okay, yeah. So this idea of making a list. Anything else? We've got manager. Oh, sorry, and you asked them. Okay, yeah. So this idea of sometimes for me, it's getting super quiet. Like I might just go in my room and shut the lights off. It's weird because I have my antennas out all the time. I'm always taking in all this information. Sometimes it's literally turning the light off and saying, what is coming up? What's coming up for me that needs to be dealt with? With our team, we used to do, what are our top 3 for today? What are the top 3 that you just can't stop thinking about, that we just need to take care of that, so that you can move on to other things or find that balance again. So sometimes this setting of priorities, it could be as simple as, and I'm not saying it's necessarily simple to make a list, but where it's visual, or you're hearing it somehow, or you are somehow looking at all of the piles that you've got on your desk, and you're choosing something, but you're giving it your attention so that you can push that thing either over the finish line or you can address it in our lives. And with self-care, it might mean taking care of our family and making sure that things are okay. Maybe somebody in the family needs extra attention. That might be a part of your priority for that day. And it doesn't necessarily have to take a long time to set your priorities and determine what are you going to focus on today or this month, or in some cases, this year has been that for me, actually. It's been, what are my priorities for this year? What matters to me in the work that I do? So someone, we've got in the chat box where it says, sometimes you become overwhelmed, a lot on the plate, and you just need to take a minute and take some deep breaths to tackle the list one thing at a time. Yeah, one thing at a time. And sometimes I also put lists on different pages. Like I'll just get printer pages and I'll just write something on the page. And then I can actually move the list, because I'm not just writing it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 30, or Post-it notes on a wall. Sometimes that really helps because they're not numbered, and I start picking off things that really are standing out to me. So delegate and remove nice to haves. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for adding delegation, because that is our number 2. We'll just move right on to number 2. So the idea of delegation, again, if you're anything like me, there is that feeling like you've got important work to do. This event has got to go this certain way. You've got a plan. And the idea of letting go, this idea of learning to let go sometimes can be super tough for us, because there are times where we feel like no one can do it the way that we do it, and we can do it so much faster. Thumbs up or a wave, or if anyone has said that sometime in your planning life, where you're like, I am just going to take care of it because it just has to be done. So I think sometimes in this letting go, it's also letting go of our expectations on how necessarily it's going to be done. And Brene Brown actually has this really great concept of paint done. She calls it paint done. But the understanding of that is, what does done look like? And so that is a really great something that we can be adding in our letting go, where we can actually be communicating, not just delegating and giving somebody the giant stack of papers and saying, okay, now this is yours and I've got to get it off my plate. But we're very clear in 5, 10, 15 minutes saying, this is the task that I feel needs to be done. You're uniquely equipped to do this task. And then I can let it go, because we have this collective understanding about what done means. And delegating to somebody also gives them that beautiful opportunity to show up. And sometimes we also feel like, because we feel like we're the only ones that have that ability to do that task and do it fast and get it done the way that we love getting things done, we're not allowing people to, when we're letting go, what happens? Actually, somebody did this on a different call another day, where they were throwing a ball to each other, you know, in the windows of a Zoom call. And this idea of throwing the ball and letting go of that ball, the reality is somebody's going to catch it. And we sometimes feel like it all lands with us. And so in this letting go, we're going to be surprised, and usually pleasantly surprised, that there will be people in our lives that are willing to take the ball. And there have been times where I've actually said, where I just can't even pick, I'm trying to shovel and get this ditch dug. You know, I'm trying to get this hard work done. And I've been surprised, because I don't want to burden anybody. I don't want to, you know, there's that whole other part of it, to give the shovel to somebody, and people have that energy and time and the desire to support, that they're going to pick up that shovel and keep digging and making sure this job gets done. And in some ways, you're going to find people that love that job even more than you. So, so somebody added in the chat box to delegate and remove the nice to haves. I think this idea of freeing people up to also be part of the work, that's something that sometimes we assume that it's just tough work, and that it's, you know, something that is just burdening us. But then for someone else, that might be a joy for them to do it. So we're going to move right on to number 3. And as I do that, you could add in the chat box maybe some things that you have learned to let go. And you've seen this actually working, where when you have let go, then people have been there for you, and they have been that, not just a support, but an ally over time. So that is that is leading us to number 3, this idea of assembling allies. Again, when we're in the middle of what seems like either crisis or burnout or overwhelm, this might feel really hard for us to think about assembling. And if you see your 10 steps there, all of those are action words. We've got determine, learn, assemble, look, sound, reflect, identify. All of those things mean that we have a responsibility to step up and take care of ourselves. So this is another one of these, might seem like it's tough when we're trying to take care of ourselves, but this assembling allies. I have done some sessions with some of my clients where we actually take a whole whiteboard in my other office and we start throwing up names, and we're like, who are those people that have your back? Who are those people that love what you're working on? Who are those people that you're somehow associated with, that they have resources or support? And we start digging into who are they, getting very specific with names, because it's amazing how a name will lead to another name, will lead to another name. And then as we start digging into what do those people bring to the table? Why do they love what you do? This idea of assembling allies around our self-care is a way for us to, number one, get the support we need. That's really important. So the idea of having others that can we can delegate to. The other part of that is that we want to be accountable. And I, I'll speak for myself. I sometimes get into my own head so much that I feel like there are 10 things that are super important where maybe only 2 of them are. Maybe there's another way. And maybe if I looked at it from a different perspective, I could see either a way through, or that this is something that I need to maybe let go of, or maybe I can get additional support through my allies in that area. Does anyone, have you been in that position where you felt like it's all on me, but that when you are accountable, it's not just a negative, because sometimes we think of accountability as a negative thing. Oh, they're going to find all the dirty laundry, or they're going to tell me to, exercise, longer, or to, sometimes we feel like that's going to be an imposition on our lives. How many of you have felt like when you have found an ally and they've gotten very real, and you had a really very open and free conversation about where you're at, that actually creates some freedom in your life? So we've got a couple of thumbs up. So this idea of being accountable and allowing the support into your world and into your work is really a great way for us to see that over the course of time. And that's why I say for myself, I am a Lone Ranger, have been through and through for many, many years. And it is actually something I've had to work at, to include people and open up this idea of allies in the work I do. And the Lone Ranger piece of that for me is just that I feel like I have the capability, I have what I need to do the work. But the reality is, moving from survival mode, like I talked about in the sustainability, just surviving is not a way to live a life. We need to be thriving. And to do that, we have to do that in community with each other. And that's what allies means here. So number four is this looking for efficiencies. Like I said, sometimes that will come from an ally taking a look, like with an outside look at our work or our life or our schedule or our routines. Sometimes it is about finding efficiencies ourselves. So I love what somebody had said earlier about making those lists, or when we talked about those piles. Sometimes the efficiencies can be one of my skills, or if you, Strengths Finder, if you know that. One of my top strength is connectedness. So for me, I try to find connectedness between people or projects or parts of projects. And what happens when you start doing that and learning how to connect the dots in a different way, you start to find efficiencies where you can streamline a process. Maybe there's one person doing one job and someone else doing another job, but there really should be one job. and that person could do it so much faster. Maybe it's 10% more of the work to combine it. So when we start to find these ways of creating efficiencies in the work or in the plans that we're working on, we find that there is um, new processes that we can design within that context. And if this is something about your personal life and you taking care of yourself, the efficiencies can be, this was kind of a joke in the past, but I had at one time, I still do, but I had wanted to lose like 20 pounds. And so I would joke at work with my team, and I would say, the only time I have in my day to work out would be 5 a.m. And everyone would be like, ha ha, that's so funny. And who would ever do that? and I got to the end of my excuses and started to wake up early and work out it was literally 15 minutes, from 5 to 5:15 or 5:20. And I started working out, and I started doing that. I think I'm not doing that right now. I need to maybe get back to that someday. But this idea of finding the efficiency in my day, where I knew that I only had a tiny little window, but I tell you, I lost the weight, and it was about 5 or 6 months that actually was part of my routine, to just wake up. Now I happen to wake up early all the time because I just kind of turned into this morning person. I used to be a night owl. So this idea of finding efficiencies, there's always a window. If you want it bad enough, there's always going to be a window. How have you guys found efficiencies for easier execution? Have you found that in your teams as you're planning events? Have there been ways that you have? I know with AAP, I know that the team has found efficiencies with role descriptions. That's what I've heard. You know, how have some of you found efficiencies in your planning or in your world or your life, where you have really allowed yourself to not just do more, but be more efficient in the work that you're doing and getting probably better work done? These would be great to share with each other, because I know that it's different for everybody. The idea of working or waking up at 5 for some of you is not an option. Reuse previous efforts. Okay, can you expand on that just a little bit? The idea, I would call that repurposing. Because I think this idea, that it's a perfect example, because you can use something in a certain track, but then if you can repurpose that over here because the process seems to work or there's some similarities, that is absolutely a way that you can streamline. I love that. That's great. Anybody else? Constant communication. That to me is really interesting, because the idea of communication, I did a session once on team management, and this idea, it was it seemed so simple, but what this one gal was saying was that there were so many emails going back and forth and crossing over each other, and a lot of information that was getting missed, or the amount of time it took her, or people weren't reading the emails, where she had a whole list of things that people needed to know, and then they get on the meeting and nobody really knew it, so she had to reiterate everything that was in the email. And this idea of constant communication can create such a great efficiency, where there might be one person that is the hub of information, and then there's a flow of communication that happens over time, where we can only digest so much. So if for example, she had 20 points in her email, maybe it's just too much to digest. And people are like, I'll read it later, or I'll print it off and then I'll just bring it to the meeting. So there are ways that we can create that efficiency for sure. Yeah, with constant communication, whether it's email or some other platform, but definitely. So we've got in the chat box here, things you have designed. Oh, this was the idea of reusing previous efforts, this idea of repurposing, that there might be some tweaks or some redecorating to work again. Don't reinvent the wheel. Absolutely. My girlfriend, actually, she did, her career was actually doing decor at the Stampede grounds here in Calgary. And she moved on, she's retired now, but she moved on and she started doing redesign in homes. So it wasn't so much that she was staging homes, with brand new furniture and pictures. She was looking at a home, would evaluate what's there, and she would move things around. And people would be like, I can't believe what you've done with this room. But there was no additional artwork, no money spent. It was just the idea of putting things in another place that felt like now this was where, this is our happy space. This is going to work for us. The way that it was designed made sense. So just to your point, that's fantastic. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I say all the time that you don't necessarily need more resources. It's just a matter of redesigning how things are put together so that we see those efficiencies. This might be a great place if your brain doesn't work that way. If that's not something that comes naturally for you, what a great place for an ally to come in and get their eyes on it, on a plan, in your home, on your parenting, on your self-care, and for them to help you find those efficiencies. I have had many, many friends that have helped me in different areas that don't come naturally for me, to look in and say, if we just had this and this and this in place, look at where you would be. And all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. So moving on to number 5, the idea of sounding the alarm. This one, I wasn't sure how, because we are not necessarily, if we are in events, and I've been told this, and I'm sure you guys have as well. The idea of running an event takes a calm personality. It takes somebody that's willing to help put out fires without freaking out. It takes really this idea of being grounded, and you're not reacting to everything that happens. It might be on site, but it also might be with your team. So this idea of sounding the alarm, I really toyed with that because I'm like, I'm not sure if that is the message I want to be giving. But at the same time, there has to be a place where we say what's happening right now is not either good for me, or it's coming against my self-care routine that I've put in place, or I'm feeling like this is now beyond where I know that I am going to be healthy and vibrant and my best. That's what this is about. This is about how are we showing up, really getting clear and knowing how are we showing up our best, and then allowing ourselves, whether that's an internal alarm or with somebody that we trust, or if it's an ally that we've put them sort of in charge of taking a look at the way that we're functioning in life, that we want to really add self-care to our life. This idea of sounding the alarm means that we know that when we're in survival mode, that can only happen so long. And when we move into this space where now it's becoming either dangerous because we're either putting ourselves or others at risk for some reason, or we have something in ourselves where we know that we're going to start to spiral. If thumbs up if you have those things that you've been there, where you just know that if you continue in this space, there will be a spiral down, and you're going to start to second guess yourself and your choices and those things that you have put in motion. It may not be a problem with your event plan or even your team. It might just be that you are overtaxed, or you've hit a wall, or something has been triggered in you where you're like, this is now beyond my capability. So I want to sit on that for a minute, because for any of you, would you be willing to share in the chat box what that might be for you? I'll share, as you kind of think about that, I'll share what has been like this last week, where I told my coach, where I was like, I've got to take my foot off the gas. What I was noticing is that I was not feeling rested. I was getting a lot of sleep, but not feeling rested. I was feeling like I've got too many balls in the air. I was feeling like maybe 2021, because we're actually looking at probably another year of online, another year of virtual events. Hybrids are really up in the air, not sure what's going to happen with those. And so for me, I was just feeling like everything was this bucket of porridge where I'm not quite sure what's in there, and how am I going to make sense or make this into something. And it was that understanding for me that I needed to sound the alarm for myself and just say, I need to just take myself away from the computer more often. I want to keep loving on the work that I do. I'm not letting it go. It's something that is part of me. I live and breathe the work that I do. But at the same time, I had to sound that alarm for myself. And I personally trust my coach, and to be able to share that with him, where I was able to say, this is a space where I need to take some space. I need to step back just a bit. So for any of you, have you noticed that in yourself? What is it that is, I don't really want to use the word trigger, but there will be something where it's like, that's a thing, and I have to now wake up to it. And I know we all face it. So even if it doesn't go into the chat, I know we all face these times where sometimes it's like, I'm not sure exactly what's happening. And that can be part of it actually too, because if you, again, are like me and you're a planner that wants to keep all those balls in the air, sometimes the difficulty is when we don't know what that next step is, it can be quite overwhelming because we're planners and we like to just put those steps in motion. So somebody says here, start skipping workouts. Yep. Where that might be something where if you're aware enough that you have now moved to that place and the workouts are important enough for you that keeps you grounded, that would be definitely something that would be sounding the alarm on that for sure. Before it gets too late, right? Before all of a sudden you're now feeling lethargic or your diet starts changing, it kind of can spiral into other things. Yeah, awesome, thanks guys. So this idea, then moving from that to reflecting on the impact. So this idea of noting how your activities affect your feelings and impact your work. So the idea of, again, this balance that I think we all sometimes or want to strike, where we've got work and whether it's our work, our teams, planning teams, the tasks, the processes, the people that we're trying to really care for over here. And then we've got ourselves and how we're showing up, and that we are able to have that groundedness in who we are and how we are having this impact. The reflecting on when we're sounding the alarm, something's going on in our life, and we are now changing our schedule, or something's happening here where we've gone outside of this box of where we know we're healthy and vibrant and we're ready to go. Now we're stepping out into this kind of mucky place over here where we're not exactly sure what's happening. Sounding the alarm here will have that effect on our impact. And the idea of, and I say this because reflecting on the impact for me is because that impact, the positive impact of what I do through my work, the people that I can support, the clients that I know need either some clarity in their planning, maybe they need some team management, maybe they just are unsure what's coming up for them in this next year. The impact that I am trying to make through the work I do matters. And when I reflect on how this world compared to this world is affecting my impact, and how all of a sudden things are out of balance, the impact for me, really getting clear on that and reminding myself, sometimes people say it's finding your why, it's really finding the purpose that you have. These things will remind you to take care of the alarm. So if we are not in the game, if we are not doing the work, not only that we love, but that matters in the community, that matters to our teams, this idea of sounding the alarm is going to help not just keep us in the game, but keep us in the game in the way that we know we are working at our best. And so in this number 6, in the reflection, I would personally say, and I work big, I like poster boards, I like whiteboards, but writing out why what you do matters is really important here. And you could go as far as, if you were out of the game, what is the impact on the community if you weren't there? And Allison, if I could use AAP as an example in this, because, and not just you specifically as somebody that is working on the events and helping build that community, But sounding the alarm, if something's off the rails, or you know that you're out of sync, or that rhythm isn't happening, the effect then would happen, probably trickle down to your members, where they're feeling like there might be some disorganization, or maybe there's, it's not worth their time to show up. The idea of what AAP does, and I'll say this because I love the community there, of connection and thriving and learning. All of those things matter. And if AAP wasn't there to serve your members in the way that you do, you would not have the impact that you currently have. And so the idea of reflecting on what that impact is, making sure that we're stepping back, sounding the alarm, and then moving from that to number 7, to where we're identifying and getting very specific about the people, processes, and planning activities that matter. So once you've thrown everything on the board and you feel like you've kind of come to a place where you really, you feel it again, you understand what your impact can be. And thank you for letting me use the AAP example, but a lot of you on the call are running very important either movements, or the mission you have in your business, or the organization that you run where you've got a lot of people that are under your care. This idea of stepping into identifying what matters. And this comes back a little bit to the efficiencies, but when you understand what people need to be involved, what processes need to be in place, and your planning activities that matter, it will help you strip away some of the things that may not need to be done either today or ever. We get sometimes really caught up in maybe the way it's always been done, maybe in processes that have been put in place by people we feel that are senior to us, or they have more experience to us. But there is a time where we have to ask the hard questions and say, not just does it matter, but why does it matter? In the chat box, we've got how you rely on your allies, and this idea of sounding the alarm, that your team is there to re-energize and motivate you. I love that. I love that. And probably in this same case here, where this idea of there is a common identity, and whether you're working for an association or if you're just a solo entrepreneur, there will be people in your world that can help you identify those things that really matter to you. And I've had people in my life say, whenever we get together, they're like, man, you just light up when you talk about this, or there's so many pieces to what you're working on, but boy, these 3 things, like they're really something that just keeps showing up for you over and over again. And so this idea of identifying what matters, making sure that we've got the right people, the right process, and the right planning activities in place so that you can stay on track over time. And again, that feeds back into this idea of being sustainable. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same team members or the same allies forever. That changes over time. But there will be this feeling like you are grounded in what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how is the best way for you to show up over and over again in time so that you have the greatest impact. It's on the other sheet, but the greatest impact that you can have in your community. Number 8. And this is one I'd love for you guys to add in the chat box, but this idea of creating mini strategies. I'm an event coach and strategist, and I love the work that I do. A lot of what we do in strategy is very deep dive work where we go into long-term team relations. We go into your whole event cycle, and that can be 12 to 18 months. We go into quite deep strategies around how do you function better together? What processes do you need in place? The idea of a mini strategy is that strategic work doesn't always have to be this giant, long-term, 3-day event to get a strategy in place. There can be small strategies and little pockets that we can be adding things to our life every day that will help us stay on track. So this idea of putting these mini strategies in place to help support your new self-care routine. What do you guys do yourselves that would be one of those strategies? Now this can be as simple as waking up before everyone else does so that you can make your coffee and kind of get your head on straight for the day. It can also be maybe a check-in with one of your allies where you are allowing, again, yourself to open up and say, this is where I'm at today. And just thank you so much for being part of this. But then if there is a day that you just need that support, then you're going to be already in that rhythm where that'll be a very reasonable conversation and something that you can be doing every day, making sure that you're checking in. And they can feed back into that plan or your process or how to support your people better through the process. So any ideas around mini strategies that you guys already use, or that working through this that you could put in place even tomorrow that would help you on that road to self-care? Any ideas? So the mini is something that will be for you. So this idea of what works for me may not be what works for you. And there was somebody that had mentioned earlier, one of those awareness points was that when you start skipping workouts, you know that you're kind of now going outside of that box of what works for you, that you know that this is the piece, or how your life works the best, how you show up as a planner in the best way possible, you're living your best life. So if you're skipping those workouts, what would be a little mini strategy you could put in place to kind of get yourself back on track again? Again, this is about not necessarily keeping your foot on the gas. Maybe it's just taking your foot off the gas just a little bit, but this idea of making sure that you're staying in the game and that you're not giving up on really being healthy and ready to go in your work. Awesome. So as we get those in the chat box, I'll note a couple of them because I think those are really important. And if you are watching this as a replay, I'd love to hear from you what kind of mini strategies you put in place for your own self-care. All right, so we've got a couple of things here. This idea of taking time for group chats that don't involve work. What? That is real. I want to sit on that for a second, because sometimes that is the key. And sometimes in the creative zone that we need as planners, we are always creating, and we're always strategizing, or we're always making plans for the next thing. But the idea of having people, and in this case, in our world, to have some Zooms that don't involve work conversations, no shop talk, can really be refreshing, right? Like just taking that time. So what a great, really great strategy. Talking about what you're doing outside of work and making sure that we are built and multifaceted people. We're built where we are contributors for sure, but at the same time, the beauty of event planning is that we can get inspiration from anywhere. And that is, I published a magazine called Moments, and it was one of my motivators in this magazine, was that I want to learn from the design world. I want to learn from fashion. I want to learn from AV and tech. Like, what is it about an event that all of those elements together are what makes it beautiful? So this idea of really looking outside of our work actually can enhance the work that we do, even though, yes, it's not about work. So that's awesome. Great. So this idea, number 9, we're getting really close to the end here. Number 9 is sharing. Again, as a Lone Ranger, and maybe some of you can identify with this, it's hard for us to share with people where we either need support or how we're built and how they can best support us. So some of you might know the book, The 5 Love Languages. There's also another book called The 5 Apologies, or Ways of Apology, something like that. What I love about the concept is that we don't all hear things the same way. We don't all get feedback in the same way. A boss or maybe the person that's coordinating the event, that you have your team. Just because you're a great people person doesn't mean that we know how everybody is going to receive feedback or instruction in the same way. We have to look at ourselves that way as well. So this idea of sharing with others what works for us. So if we are looking at our allies, if we're looking at people that are resources or they're offering resources in our life, this idea of sharing with our support system what works and when and how they can help. So again, all of these things are about taking responsibility for our own self-care. But this idea of sharing what works is saying, this is me, and this is how I'm built, and this is how I'm going to hear what you have to say. And the idea of translating that to sort of across the board, so that I am hearing it. I might need someone to, I used to think I needed somebody to come at me with almost like a coach would, like where it was like, just work harder and you can do it. But what I found over time is those people in my life, I actually started to really retract and feel like, oh, like I'm so tough on myself already. And then to somehow think that is going to support me, it actually doesn't. It makes me feel like I'm just dropping more balls, or I'm just not doing what I should be doing. So this idea of sharing with like in my case, my coach, maybe my allies, my team, sharing with them, how am I going to receive either feedback, or if you see that I have somehow, I've taken my foot off of the gas and now I need support. I need for people to know, how is it best that I am going to receive what you have to say, any suggestions you might have, maybe any mini strategies I could put in place. What am I needing right now? I have had a couple of friends in the past that have used words like, there is a fire in you that no one can put out. And I'm like, you're right. That, because for me, that's how I hear that I need to continue to do the work that matters, because that's something that is innate for me, this community building, bringing people together. And that works for me better than somebody kind of cracking the whip and saying, just get out there and do the hard stuff. That there's ways that we understand that support. The last one here is then honoring your efforts. So as we get this feedback from the people in our lives, you truly, I believe all of you, are truly doing your best. And so some of us are very hard on ourselves. Some of us might need that encouragement, but there is something about us encouraging ourselves and showing up for ourselves and honoring our efforts in becoming more sustainably able to care for ourselves. It is a process. And what I do say in the booklet as well is that this idea of an event, this again is in your booklet here, but an event doesn't magically happen in one day or a week or even a month. And the same thing is true with seeing results in our new self-care routine. So when we need to take care of ourselves, don't be too hard on yourself, because you're putting new things in place so that you can, again, hold your tasks and your timelines and your team all sort of in a space where they're feeling cared for and things are still happening, while at the same time you're taking care of yourself. And this idea of really making sure that we're just taking the next best step and the next best step and the next best step towards a more sustainable self-care routine, that's really important, because this idea of honoring where you're at today and also being excited and energized about what's to come, that's what's really important. So this idea of honoring where you're at, making sure that there's that time that you can put in every day for self-care. And then in these steps, remind yourself, and as you're going through this booklet, there might be one or two of these, like the idea of reflecting on how your feelings impact your work. Maybe you want to assemble this community of accountability partners. Maybe there's some of these steps that you're like, that is one thing that I would love to focus on this next week or two. Please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you and would love to support you in that. The work here at Candy is so important for me to continue to show up for you guys, because I think in the end, not only are we all in this together, but we are all doing the work that we do in different ways for different reasons, and the work that matters needs to continue. And so I want really to encourage you guys to reach out to someone in your life in the next week or two, share with them what you've learned about new tips on self-care. And then the idea of it becoming sustainable over time. I want to make sure that you guys have what you need. If you haven't visited, we do have a new website live. I'm pretty excited about it because we've been able to filter down very clearly into the work that I do as an event coach, but also allowing you guys just to take a look at the idea of preparing well for your events. We come in, we help you strategize around your events, and then the coaching component is really what I've been talking about today, is that this is an ongoing job, that we are doing this over and over again, and the events that you plan matter. It's so important that we take care of each other and that we take care of ourselves, and that there's this opportunity for us to continue our work and to be doing that in a vibrant and really exciting way. So thank you. Any questions? I know we're right at 12 o'clock, just after 12 o'clock. We'll wrap up for today, but any questions or comments before we say goodbye? I so appreciate you guys being here. There has been some great tips in the chat, but I would love for you guys to maybe comment if you can. When this goes up on YouTube, there will also be the downloadable workbook there. And I would love to connect with you in your workbook. There also is the email there. It's guides@CandyConsulting.ca if you have any questions about this session, or if you have any ideas for future sessions. We'd love to hear from you. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And we'll see you again. Feel free to check our website out. There's going to be the new guides loaded up there for January. So we'll talk to you hopefully then. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. We'll see you again.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
You too, yeah.